Welcome to the Dom Sub Devotion Podcast. Every episode of Dom Sub Devotion is an authentic reflection of our real life in a loving 24/7 DS marriage. If you crave the passion and intensity of a power exchange dynamic inside of a deeply loving and intimate relationship, you've found the right place. You can always find more from us in the show notes and at infinitedevotion.com. Thank you for listening.
I wanted to spend some time today talking about codependency, union, depending on each other, and how all of these things, when you combine them with dominant-submissive dynamics, can really start to muddy the waters a bit in terms of how we relate to each other. And I know we have our own experiences with this, and I'm hoping that we'll get into some of them, but I wanted to start out with really just sharing a little bit of a definition of codependency for people who are maybe new to this concept or have heard the word but don't really know what it means. So, codependency is a behavioral condition in relationships where one person is overly reliant on the other for validation, self-worth, and emotional stability, often at the expense of their own needs and well-being. It typically involves excessive emotional, physical, or psychological reliance on a partner, friend, or family member. In a codependent relationship, one person often assumes the role of the caretaker or enabler, while the other may depend on this support for issues like addiction, irresponsibility, or emotional struggles. And some key characteristics of codependency include difficulty setting boundaries, fear of abandonment or rejection, need for control over others or situations, feeling responsible for others' feelings and actions, and prioritizing others' needs over one's own needs.
So you just gave all the examples of how I used to show up.
And me too, in a lot of ways. We did this to each other for a long time. So you can see in just hearing that definition how when you start to consensually play with taking control and giving up control, if there are these patterns, which I think everyone to some extent has some of this because we all have the childhood wounds around love, you can see how these dom-sub dynamics can start to get intermingled with these codependent relationship patterns. And this is why I think dominance and submission is so challenging for people to do when there's love involved.
I agree with that one.
So when you think about codependency, you said all the ways you used to show up.
Mm-hmm.
What has that been like for you to start to see those patterns?
It's been a process of undoing, of unlearning the reactions. And, it just takes time to really allow all of it to come to the surface, to fully see all the different ways that this plays out. And for me, it was in all relationships. It wasn't just you. I mean, I've mentioned, I think I used that word in one of the podcasts just in relation to my own children, which really feels a little embarrassing to say. But when I was operating out of a subconscious way of living, we all do that to some extent. How could I do anything different? Because going back to that childhood, we do need to feel love. We do need to feel that from our caregivers. And we will choose trying to get that over being ourselves all the time. So you can't be yourself and be codependent. at the same time.
And this has been a thing for me too. Because one of the ways that codependency plays out is this feeling of like, I need you to be different before I can be okay. I need you to be okay or I can't be okay.
Hmm.
And that's probably been the biggest one for me that I've had to look at as I've stepped out of the role of kind of being I've called it the king of the suburbs before, like the brain dead, go to work, make money, come home, put the check in the bank account, and think that that was my only role and purpose as a man.
That's so sexy. Not.
But to really step into ownership of my own life has meant for me that I've had to look at the ways that I've avoided stepping into ownership of my own life because I was waiting for your validation, your approval, your permission. And that never, when I see that as a man, that never feels good. It never feels like I'm in any kind of strength when I need to wait for you to give me like the pat on the back and tell me that I'm a good boy and that I'm doing a good job. And I don't imagine it is very attractive to you to see me that way.
No, and just hearing you explain that, going back to all of those times where we'd get to a point where you would say, in some fashion, I'm not quoting you here, but I need some words of affirmation.
Mhm.
And now looking back, I didn't use the word then, but it was a collapse. You were seeking my validation for you, but understandably so, right? You wanted to feel my love, but the reason you couldn't feel my love was because of that,
Mm.
partly, right?
Yeah, it was that partly, and it was also partly the ways that you were kind of experiencing yourself in your own shutdown. And like sometimes it wasn't there to feel from you, but when I was reliant on getting it from you and you didn't have it to give because of your own internal experience, that's a like that's a mucky place to be.
Yes, but what I'm getting at here too, of course I had a part in it because that's like the whole concept of trauma bond, but that's a beautiful thing because you have your person that you get to work through these traumas, wounds, challenges, and that's when they can truly become opportunities. But what I'm speaking to is like because of your own inner mess, you can't even really feel the love that your partner is even giving because
Correct.
I I know for me, even now coming as far as I have, I still could feel some love from you. Like it wasn't nothing, even though I had a lot of wounding around my heart.
What are some of the ways for you, and I definitely want to get to how this impacts dominance and submission, but what are some of the ways for you that you've noticed yourself, if you have any examples or specifics, needing validation, needing approval from me rather than trusting yourself?
Oh, there's a lot there. Because one of the patterns that I saw, but you were the first bringing to the surface, was the always looking for external authority in whatever I did. I was seeking some sort of outside structure from myself. Now, we could go into why that is, but that isn't really neither here nor there. But because that was my pattern, I still did that with you. And so it was, you know better than I do. Like, You're brilliant. You're like so intelligent.
I love the way you talk me up on this podcast.
I'm
If I
not
ever need
lying.
words of affirmation, I'm just going to say, let's record a podcast.
You are. And so from the very beginning, you felt like this shining knight in armor on a white horse. And you, to me, you kind of felt like you saved me from something. Now, what that was, I don't need to get into all of that, but I always had this admiration for you. Maybe because you were my boss at the beginning.
Well, there's that.
But also just the man that you were, like the way you displayed yourself to the extent that you could. Like obviously you are a much different man today than you were back then, but I still saw all of the, I'm just going to simply say it, great qualities in you. And so when we got together, like you brought in so many different pieces to my life, experiences that I never got to have. And so again, there was just this like, without me really expressing it, I know that, disclaimer, but there was a lot of gratitude for what I got to experience because of you. And so fast forward to our Dom sub, I still was in all of the people pleasing patterns. Now, was it purely people pleasing? I can honestly say no. Like, there was still some version of me that I shared this before, that I felt this knowing that I just needed to jump in and follow you. But it's been because of this relationship and recognizing the emotional growth needed to be who I wanted to be in this relationship that I've had to really face all of the different ways that I would just follow because I wanted to give you what you wanted. And you were more important than myself.
And that's where these patterns really start to mess with healthy Dom sub dynamics.
Absolutely.
Because on one hand, somebody could hear that and say, yeah, that's what submission is. Just giving the Dom everything he wants.
No, I disagree.
And one of the things that we like to say in this, when we are being playful but also somewhat serious, is that I always get what I want.
You do, but with heart.
But not by you just shutting down and closing yourself off to your own experience and just, well, mindlessly obeying. We just did a whole episode talking about mindless obedience. So if you haven't listened to or watched that one, go back one, listen to that one. But when we talk about mindless obedience, what we're not talking about is you just shutting down and going and turning into a robot. So this is where these dynamics get, I really think it's where they get messed up most of the time, is a submissive ends up feeling as though she can't say no. Even if she knows she has a safe word or could, she internally doesn't feel like she can say no because of fear of abandonment, fear of losing love, these codependent patterns that start to infiltrate and mess with her submission. Because for me to get everything that I want, I don't just want to shut you down and make you do it. I want to lead you to a place where it feels good to both of us that I can have what I want in a way that's healthy and that is in respect for who you are, but also lets you follow me.
Yeah, there is so much nuance to what you're speaking to there. So Just know that, everyone.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, the way I simply just put it before is because you have a heart, because there's love involved, and you care about the authentic desire in me, and you can feel it when it's there and when it's not. And you will not force me to do something when there's not the authentic desire.
And that's where this gets messy on the other side of it,
Mhm.
because I don't want you to do anything for me that doesn't feel good to you, because it doesn't feel good to me. But then where codependency can start to creep in inside of myself is now I need to, like, I start to get overly entangled in you with, like, with your experience and trying to shift and fix and maybe manipulate and control your internal experience, because there is something that I want and a place that I want to take you. And even if you want to go there, but you're having trouble getting there, now if I'm feeling stuck, codependency can kick in on my side as the dominant, needing you to be different so I can feel okay, so I can feel fulfilled.
Yep. And that's where, on my side, I will feel that too. And I will speak up. And I have had moments where I feel like something is getting triggered inside of me and I don't fucking know what it is. And I just let it out without fear, to the extent that I can, to the extent of my awareness of not operating out of any fear, and give that all to you. And then y what I've seen you do is be able to receive that and then use that as your mirror to really sit with, am I coming from a codependent pattern or manipulating or being needy or however you want to describe it.
Yep.
And so I do want to say this, that this is not talking down to codependency, because you can only change an aspect of yourself in your relationship when you're aware of it. And so it's more like shining the light on, where am I feeling fear, and where am I trying to put someone else before myself, and where am I trying to um maybe act like I don't matter, like whatever the language is. It really is a process to undo these things, and it's okay, right? Like,
It's a very natural thing. I think everyone to some extent develops these patterns.
exactly. I really think that, from I'm just going to say majority of people, because I'm not going to operate in a one size fits all black and white approach, but we do this in some areas of our lives no matter what, until we actually start to know ourselves and start to shine the light on these things. And now we can choose something different. But it also takes, we've spoken about this before, it also takes a lot of communication and patience. Shocking, right?
Yeah. Those themes that seem to come up in every one of these conversations.
Right.
So, in that definition that I read, it talked about excessive dependence. And that is another subjective word. Excessive. What's excessive? Because when we start going down the more spiritual route of what this connection is between you and me and what it is that we seek together, we do depend on each other. We absolutely, like, I absolutely depend on you. And I absolutely want to be there for you to be able to depend on me, to count on me. So the opposite of codependence, or I guess the healthy growth out of codependence, isn't to independence. It's not to a place where we don't need each other, where we don't count on each other.
Not in a dominance and submission relationship.
Not in a dominance and submission relationship, and not in a power exchange dynamic, or a relationship where you're seeking union. Because what I want for us is to be one with each other. And there we go, sounding complicated again, because how do we be one with each other without being codependent on each other?
Well, so what I have started to feel in all of this growth is that to actually know the light, you have to know the dark. So in order to get to union, you have to experience some sort of codependency, because then you can choose something else. Right? And I've experienced that in so many different things as I've come more into myself. It's like, oh, okay, the only way I can know this true, authentic feel is because I've had the opposite. Do you have any take on that?
For me, the biggest thing that comes up when you say that is that I have I have had to understand my own weakness and get comfortable with with my pain, with my past, with the things that cause these patterns, the things that have caused me to show up as needy, the things that have caused me to show up as afraid of upsetting you, because that's really where the root of a lot of this was for me. So, yeah, I think we always have to get to know the flip side of something to be able to really see it.
Because, like, even in our last few years, when we really came to feel that depth of the connection that we call the union, um, but we also use in our day to day lives, it's connection, right? And like, there's been plenty of times where a while ago where we would feel it, and then all of a sudden it was like, what happened?
Where'd it
You
go?
know, like, what's going on? And now looking back, I can see that it was just falling into those unconscious, subconscious codependency, people pleasing,
Mhm.
lack of awareness, like whatever that was. But again, it was like, I can feel it. I can't. I can feel it. I can't. I can feel it. And the feeling, the connection has only grown to what most often we can live in it. And I claim my part in the times where I get wrapped up in an ego moment, but also from my perspective in it, experiencing all of that. Here, I'm going to prop you up again, and experiencing you receiving me in it all the time, ongoing without any judgment. It's allowed me to also see and feel more and more of those codependent patterns.
So I'm going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here. So bear with me for a minute. But anytime now that it feels like we lose connection, where we are not in that union with each other, first of all, it is there so much more as encouragement for anyone who's trying and starting on this path and working into these power exchange dynamics, because you know there's something more, and it's like it's working and then it feels like it's gone. It's exciting and then it's gone. as encouragement for you, person who's listening to this, keep it up because it does get better. But now when we do fall out of that, or where that connection seems like it's not there, wow, is it a stark fucking contrast. There's no mistaking it, because it goes from feeling like ecstasy to feeling like hell. Sometimes that fast. Sometimes no words even have to be spoken. There was something said that I said to you in the truck as we were driving here that brought up a fear for you. And I was driving, I wasn't looking at you, we weren't talking, and I could just feel the black cloud of fear and stress and tension just hovering over us. It was like it was driving with us, a cloud over the truck as we were driving.
Good thing we made it here safely.
So it's so stark and it's so noticeable when it's not there now, that I can feel you in it so easily. And I would say, and this isn't a rip on you, it's just the reality of where we're at, that it is more often than not some experience that you're having that brings us out of it. And again, it's not a rip on you, it's just that I had to go first. I've had to do everything that I could do so that I don't fall out of consciousness, so that I can hold you in those times, so I can see you in them, so that I can learn from them, and so I can help lead us home together. So every time that I do feel you slide into one of those triggers, one of those fear reactions, first of all, I have to remember that in that moment, you've gone into an unconscious pattern. An unconscious pattern by its nature is not conscious. You aren't doing this on purpose. You don't even know that it's happening until it's already happened. And so I can't take it personally. It helps to take some of the sting out of it, because it does suck. Feeling like if there's a time that I'm trying to express myself, I'm trying to express something that I see as true, and I feel you flare up and shut down and get afraid and react, I have to remind myself that you don't even know you're doing it until it's too late. It's not personal, and that helps to take some of the sting out of it.
I'm going to share a real vulnerable moment here.
Okay.
When you started saying that, my ego was wanting to say, "What the fuck?" And everything you said was the truth. But I want to add that it's not just moments where, like, we're in conversation and I get triggered by something that you say, a truth that you see in me that I'm like, "What? I don't believe you." It's, you know, simply put, this is whether I'm in my body or in my head, in my mind. And the mind meaning the ego, and meaning the unconscious patterns. But also, you can reflect on this. I don't want to get too much into this because we can make a whole different podcast about this. But, as we left home, a little over 2 weeks ago now, 2 weeks ago, and like the last 2 weeks of our lives, I have had to face some deep, deep, probably my deepest wounding. And it felt like my heart was being ripped open. And I'm not gonna say anything more about that because I will cry. Um, but that can be on another podcast. Anyway, my point is that I was in some really deep emotional stuff. And it's feeling the pains of my past. So even in those moments, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not feeling the connection. Or are you? Because I'm in my moment to moment experience, and I have to let that be real without judgment, even if I know that I'm going to create that disconnection, because this is what's alive and real for me right now. And if I stuff it, I'm going to stay stuck.
It's both in moments like that, because I always learn something when you are having an authentic feeling moment. So do I feel like the same passionate spark between us? No, obviously, when you're crying, but
No, not in the depths of that.
you're still there with me. If you are expressing it to me, if you're feeling it for real, if you're letting me in to your experience, we're just as connected as we are any other time. When we are not, it's when you've collapsed into the ego. It's when you have gone into fear, when you've allowed a past pattern to overtake you and change your state and can take control of you. So now you're not letting me in, first of all, because you go into a shutdown.
I haven't ever done that. Just kidding. Just kidding. I
So
have.
this is where, again, all of these different concepts can kind of get muddied up, but I want to bring some clarity to it, because I paint a distinction between individuality and independence. Independence is that you don't need anyone else. You don't depend on anyone. Like, for me to be independent, it's like, I've got me. I'm good. I don't need you at all. And so then a relationship of two independent people is basically like a 50-50, right? I'm good. You're good. We're going to kind of live parallel lives together. And what I'm after for us is a 100-100 relationship where we are both, like, there's no 50-50 anything. We're both all in. So in order to live a relationship where we can depend on each other, we have to be fully individual. And the difference between individuality and independence is, to be an individual, you have to be fully, wholly, completely yourself. And I have to be fully, wholly, completely myself. And this is why this is an authenticity journey. It's why we continue to come back to the concept of authenticity in all of these conversations. Because when you're having a feeling experience about leaving home and all of the stuff that's been ripped open in you from having pulled away from there, and you're letting me into that, you are just being fully you and fully having your experience. When you let fear take over you and you pull back or shut down, now I feel you running away from having your authentic experience and attaching to an old belief or an old pattern. And now you're over there. You're not having your authentic experience. You're having the ego experience. And that's when I feel you losing individuality and then coming into codependency, because now you're trying to get from me what you can't let yourself have for yourself, which is freedom in the moment.
Yeah, I think the important word there is shutdown. Because even in all of that, I could feel my fears. I could feel my clinging to the patterns that were being ripped apart as we drove away to live in this camper. For those of you who maybe haven't ever heard one of our podcasts before. Um, but also, like, I don't even know if I can give a good example of just feeling like what my personal journey of pulling out of the codependent patterns from you, because that's been an ongoing process too, of really just seeing how I would try to seek love to fill the void in me because I wasn't loving myself. But that is one of the biggest ways it played out in our relationship. Still ongoing there, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that's what this dominance and submission thing has really continued to shine a light on for us as we've leaned into the role of leader and follower, but also continued to lean on the love that we have for each other and the respect that we have for each other and the desire that we both have for each other to live the best life that we can as individuals so that we can, and when I say best life, I mean the most authentic, free life as individuals so that we can fully depend on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what dominance and submission has become for us. It has become the means by which we are encouraging authenticity in each other.
Yeah, and that is something even before this that you really did encourage in me. And probably why, again, all those other great things I said about you. But also the fact that I felt like you could see something about me that I couldn't see about myself. And you would even tell me this. And so for me, in submission to you has really meant leaning into the love, devotion, and respect that I have for you and your ability to see me in a way I can't see myself, which is outside of my own fear. And I'm not saying I'm always perfect at this in the moment when I get triggered, but always coming back to, like you said, that love and devotion and respect for you and letting my body show me the truth of your words. It's what I've had to lean on.
And I know that's been challenging for you when your body is telling you something different than your fear,
Absolutely.
or when your body is telling you something different than your programming or your past.
Yeah, because the fear, the programming will always scream louder initially until you want to see something different. And then it still takes some patience and waiting. And like, it's where I haven't gotten to control the timeline of being able to feel the truth versus thinking the truth.
Another place that codependency can really infect submission is the feeling responsible for my feelings.
Yes, I have seen myself do that.
And that's a place where when I feel you trying to make yourself responsible for how I feel, that's a very easy place where I feel you out of yourself, where you're in one of those ego patterns. And that's where I actually learned what I said a little bit ago, where I learned to just let go of it when I feel it happening, because you are not doing this consciously. You are Again, an unconscious pattern by its definition is unconscious. You don't even know that you're doing it. And so when I would feel you go into this, like one of the ways that you like to do this for our listeners is when I make a decision, you will make sure that I know that if I wanted to decide something else, that that's also okay with you. Or if I change my mind, you will try to talk me out of changing my mind because you don't want me to have changed my mind for you.
Yep, there's that people-pleasing thing. Am I getting better at that? Please tell me I am.
You have your days still, but
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sure.
But you are definitely becoming more and more aware of it. And then as you become aware of it, that's when you can actually start to make changes. Like we've said before, you can only be responsible to the depth of your awareness. Once you're aware of it, if you keep doing it, now you're choosing it. And if you can't stop doing it, even when you're aware of it, you're still choosing it. And then you have to look at why are you choosing it.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different ballgame too there.
Yeah, but what I want to say to that, though, is the times like when it happens and you politely, gently say something to me instead of like yelling, getting angry, like whatever
Oh, yeah,
else.
I'm a real yeller.
Well, I'm just kind of giving the opposite spectrum because you don't do that. And what that helps for me, because a lot of times I will notice I did it, sometimes even as I'm saying it and the words still come out of my mouth or right after or whatever. I just don't remember as much anymore. So thankfully, I don't remember all of those times where I do fall in a pattern. Um, I think that's a good thing. Anyway, my point is the way you respond to me in those does help me see them and just accept that part of myself instead of continuously judging it or living in it or whatever. And it does start to unravel.
There's a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier where I had to go first.
Yeah.
Because if I was not in a place where I can see this happening and not be triggered by it, because it sucks for me to feel you go unconscious, to feel you go into an old pattern. And the old me from a few years ago would get upset by that. It was kind of the, oh, here we go again. Or like, she still doesn't get this. Like that was the old track that ran in my mind. And I was like, son of a bitch, like that instant kind of eye roll. But that was my unconscious reaction, right? I didn't even know that I was doing it until I was doing it. So I had to see that in myself and learn to put a pause in there and now get some self-control around how I was responding when I noticed myself starting to slip into that pattern. And then I could remind myself, okay, she's in an unconscious reaction right now. She doesn't even know she's doing this. It's not personal. So what can I learn from it? And then instead of reacting to you, like you just gave me credit for a moment ago, being able to respond in a way that points out the pattern that you're in and not right away when you're in the moment. Because if I go, as soon as I go with the little eye roll or the ah fuck or the here we go again, even if it's just internally inside of myself, you feel me go into a trigger and now you're triggered, I'm triggered. Now you're triggered by my trigger and now we're just like, we're all fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're all in like trying to control and change each other and fix each other and blame each other, make each other wrong. And nothing gets better. So I have to be the one to go first. I have to be the one to put a stop to that pattern inside myself first so that I can see you and then I can respond appropriately to shed light on what's happening rather than make you wrong for it.
And this is maybe a little off topic, but on the topic of what you're just sharing, I do want to put a point here. And this is my experience because of my perfectionistic tendency of not wanting, like, most of us don't want to be wrong at certain things. That's just an ego thing. But I really had that. And so the way you would respond was about you. And I can't really give a exact statement because it really depends on the situation. But if you changed your mind, maybe you would say, I've got this, trust me. Or like something about you versus pointing the finger at me, because that will make my ego flare up
Mhm.
if I am earlier in the stage of catching this habit of going there, of questioning.
Well, this just happened this morning.
Fill me in.
I we got a new grill. It got delivered today, and I set it up and was testing it. I put it on the tailgate of our truck,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
I turned it on, and you were also outside, and you looked at me, and you're like, "You put that on the tailgate? Doesn't it get hot?" And started, like, peppering me with questions about why I would put it there, and I just rather than first of all explain myself or defend myself or tell you that you're not being a good submissive because you're questioning me,
Mhm.
what did I say to you?
Um, I've got this in
Mhm.
some,
I looked at you and I said, "I've got this, babe.
yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna burn down the truck. I'm not gonna melt anything. Like, everything's gonna be okay. I've got it."
And the funny thing about all of that is it's here it is. It's where I'm at in the process of I thought about that before because I was on the rower, lost in my music, but I saw you doing that and you were way over there. And so when you walked over to me and I had your attention, I could say something. So I already thought about this and somewhat realized how stupid it was, but it still came out of my mouth. And then as soon as you responded to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't need to worry about that. Like, I just had this full understanding of like, let it go. He's got it just like he has everything else. And it didn't do anything to me. You let it go, I let it go, and that was it.
Yeah. That little thing could have caused a whole day-long meltdown for us a couple of years ago.
Yeah, totally.
So that's the encouragement for people in this is keep leaning into this and being willing to look at yourself and not make the other person wrong, but look at for me, why did I in the past feel all triggered and upset and pissed off when you would question me? Like, doesn't she trust me? Does she think I don't know how to do this? Like, she must think I'm an idiot. All these things that would go through my head.
Yeah.
And then I would defend myself against them. Like, all right, I got this. And you, to your credit, can just drop it.
I love when you politely tell me I've got this because what I feel in that is it puts me in my place. Yep, I'm going to trust. And for me, I wasn't always there, but I got to a point of like, oh yeah, okay, I'm good. He's got me all the time.
So I want to bring this back around to something we were talking about a little bit ago to kind of wrap this back under the umbrella of codependency and depending on each other and dominance and submission. One of the things that I've really come to realize especially in the last few months, because I'm always trying to learn more about what is the experience that we're having. Because when I see it, when I understand it, which is my role as the man, as the dominant, as the masculine partner, so to speak, it's my job to make sense of things and to be able to communicate them with clarity. So I'm always looking at what's going on with us, what's working well. When it's not working well, what is it that I can see as the reason? And one of the things that I've really come to understand is the individuality thing I was talking about before. In order for us to really be in full union, we have to be fully individual, and then we can fully depend on each other.
Mhm.
And I've said this to you a couple times, that the extent to which I am out of myself, or I'm out of my body, where I'm not being authentic, that's the same extent to which I'm not available to you, because I'm not even being me. So how can I love you with that part of myself? And how can I receive love from you in that part of myself? And it is the same the other way. So I need to be fully me, and you need to be fully you. And when we do that alongside of each other, now we also become fully in connection, or in full union with each other. So this, to me, really illustrates well how we can depend on each other, how we can lean into dominant submissive dynamics in a way that is not codependent, that really encourages full ownership and agency over our authentic self, and also then lets us be in that 100-100 kind of dynamic where we get to fully be in connection with each other at the same time. This is also what lets us move beyond things like what we talked about at the beginning of this episode in the definition of codependency, the things like need for control over others or situations. Because if, as a dominant, I'm codependent on you and I'm trying to control you to get what I want, okay, when I see this as needing you to be fully individual, now rather than try to control you to get what I want, instead I'm going to encourage you to be who you are. Instead of you feeling responsible for my feelings, you can look at me and know that you need to set me free so that I can fully be who I am, rather than try to keep me in a box that keeps your ego comfortable.
Those last words are like, put a point on that, because that's what all this is. All a codependency.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I said in a blog post on our website a long time ago was, what if, as a dominant, you took control of your submissive and you used that control to set her free and make her life better? And every single day, that is what I'm working towards. To me, that's the opposite of codependency. That's loving you. It's wanting to set you free to be yourself. And knowing that that benefits me doesn't make it codependent unless I'm getting needy about it.
Right? Pushing, forcing,
Mm-hmm.
trying to control a timeline.
Which is damn tempting sometimes. To want it.
To want it, yes, but that's something that generally is out of your control when it comes to this emotional work. Because, like, I am my own soul, so this is my spiritual journey.
My hope with this episode is that couples who are working to incorporate these dynamics can learn something about how they can lean into love and trust and depending on each other, and out of those patterns of controlling and the manipulative things that come out of codependency. But also something that we've heard so often now, that people who are seeking new partners share this episode with people that you're chatting with on apps or with potential new partners. Listen to this episode and other ones that we've released that connect with you. share them with people that you want to connect with, and let this serve as an example of maybe helping you put words to what it is that you're looking for with another person. Because that's why we do this. We share what we share to be an example of what's possible on the relational side of dominance and submission. And it has made so much possible for not just for our relationship, but for each of us as individuals. It's made me a better man. I've watched it make you a better, happier, more alive woman. And it's given us a connection and relationship that's beyond anything that we were able to develop in the first 10 years of poking around in the dark at trying to do something that worked.
Yeah. Thank you for leading us here.
Thanks for following me. Keep
My
it up.
pleasure.
And thank you all for listening. Again, we appreciate you as always. So grateful to have you with us. And please, if you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love to hear your feedback in the comments. You can leave comments on Spotify for us now. And tune in next week because we'll keep having more good stuff for you.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.